This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, rejoined by my old pal Evan Grant, back from his tour of Europe, and David Moore.
It was just Spain.
Just Spain?
Spain.
It's rather dismissive of Spain. I wouldn't say
Madrid
just.
and Barcelona and a day trip to Toledo, not Ohio.
Not Ohio?
It was a great trip. Have you,
Yeah.
Kevin? You didn't go to the Olympics in Barcelona, did you?
Yes, I did.
You did.
I did. Barcelona.
But you don't rave about it.
It was, they had just turned the fountains back on after, 200 years that they were off. They were still trying to kind of get things going. It wasn't a great time in 90, was that 92 or 94?
92.
92. Wasn't a great time in 92 at Barcelona. I mean, there was some spectacular photography from our guys, because the shots from diving were out, the diving pool was out in the open. And so they had you could see the city in the background. It's just spectacular pictures. It's a beautiful place. There's no question about that. It was just that I didn't get out much because I was constantly working, but people were saying there were refrigerators floating out there in the harbor, just stuff like that. Not good.
It's we thought it was just a beautiful city to walk around in. The Gaudi architecture that dots the whole city is absolutely stunning, and to go into that cathedral, the Sagrada Familia, and just look around, it takes your breath away. I mean, it's so over the top. It's all amazing, but at some point you're also like, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. It was easier to walk around in the park that was the Gaudi Park, because there wasn't, everywhere you turned, there wasn't some other astonishing feature. You could kind of ponder stuff a little bit, but it was a great city to walk around in. The thing that I found most interesting was, since we're here on Travel Talk, Spain had this empire in the 14, 15, 1600s, and it settled basically half of the world, colonialized half of the world. But you walk into Madrid and you walk around Madrid, and there is an ancient quarter there, or a Gothic quarter. But really, the city doesn't have that much history, because it seems like everything restarted after the Spanish Civil War. And that was the thing that I found most interesting. We were in some magnificent cathedral in Madrid, and that opened in 92. It's only 30 years old. So it's a great place. We had a fantastic time. I don't know that any place has my heart quite the way Italy does, but Spain was magnificent.
Did you eat some paella?
We ate some paella, and I ate a lot of ham croquettes. You don't know how much a man can survive on ham croquettes until you go into one tapas bar after another.
Ham croquettes.
We had paella 3 times, I think.
Good for you.
Including once by the Mediterranean Sea, which is pretty cool.
I've eaten some bad paella in my time. I'm telling you, I don't like getting it here. It's not good. Not good. Some places. Ugh, brutal.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
All right, boys, we got a little bit going on here in the local market. The Cowboys are shopping for a head coach. And before we get to our candidates and our choices, David, give us an idea of why it dragged out the way it did with Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones, and why they got to a position where after several meetings, they just decided it wasn't going to work.
Well, they did have 4 meetings last week, extensive meetings, Tuesday through Friday. A lot of it was talking through the season that just ended, their assessment of it, what went right, what went wrong, what both men would like to see going into the future together. So they were discussing going into next season and an extension together, what all that looked like. And to me, this is just the only public record you have of it is the statement issued by Jerry Jones, who said prior to negotiations, they came to the decision to split. By the letter of the law and semantically, by semantic cops I have discussed this with, that is accurate. But I think clearly what happened was both men got their arms around, okay, we can go together. We can go into the future together here. Mike, what are you thinking just in broad terms would that take? And I think McCarthy told them what it would take. I think Jones responded, well, this is really more of the framework of what I was looking at, what it would look like. And then they decided to, after the series of meetings, take the weekend to reflect on where they both stood. They both reflected, and I think it was pretty clear on Monday when they got back that, well, this gap's just too wide. So my belief is that while they didn't get down to the nuts and bolts of negotiating, that the level of commitment that Jerry Jones was willing to show Mike McCarthy did not reflect the level of commitment Mike McCarthy wanted to see from Jerry Jones.
So when you say the level of commitment, are we talking about in terms of service here, years in a contract? That's money?
Well, I think you go with years before you even get to the overall contract, right? And so I think there was I think this was the end of Mike McCarthy's. It was a 5-year deal with the club. After season 3 in a playoff appearance, he was left twisting in the wind for a week or so with 2 years left on the deal, with Jerry praising what a wonderful coordinator Dan Quinn is. Then he's allowed to go into the final year of his contract. And Jerry and Mike got along very well, and they have a lot of respect for each other. And Mike McCarthy wasn't looking to leave. Mike McCarthy would have preferred to stay here, but he wasn't going to stay here in a situation that didn't reflect what he thought it should be going forward. And I would say after that 1 year being left to twist in the wind when you still had a couple of years left on your deal and going into the final year of your deal, getting a concrete commitment from Jerry that extended beyond a year or two was imperative for Mike McCarthy. And from piecing everything together, it doesn't appear that Jerry Jones was willing to extend that offer.
So in a word, you don't think Jerry was willing to go to, say, 3 years?
I think it's 3 years minimum to have this discussion going forward. So the fact they didn't get into specifics tells me that Jerry wasn't willing to get up to that point.
Let's talk about how cheap Jerry is in all of this and how much that plays a factor in it. Because as reports are that Mike McCarthy was making $8 million a year, which is a lot of money. There's no question about that. But Sean Payton in Denver is making, and Sean Payton being a guy that obviously had a great relationship with Jerry. Jerry would have wanted to hire as his head coach at some point. Probably still wants to hire him at some point. Is making $18 million this year. That's quite a difference. And I'm wondering when we've heard also that reports that Jerry thinks that there've been too many assistants on the staff, too many people to pay. All this stuff kind of bugs him. And we hear from fans all the time talking about how Jerry's cheap, and it's hard to look at Jerry World and say Jerry's cheap, right? I mean, look at the things he does. He does put money into. But there are certain things that I think goes back to his history and who he is and the things he doesn't simply want to pay for. And that might have a factor in who he's going to hire as a head coach at some point?
Well, I think there are a couple of points here, and I think it gets to the underlying value of which Jerry Jones applies to a head coach. When the relationship with Jimmy Johnson exploded, what was the public comment that garnered the most attention? 500, people could coach this team. After the final game, so that was, that was 3 decades ago. After the loss to Washington to end this regular season, when Jerry Jones had a 38-minute filibuster about whether or not he was going to make a coaching change and what he thought of the season, and during that discourse, he was asked at one point, "Well, do you have a coaching list? Do you have a list of candidates ready in case you move on from Mike McCarthy?" The response was, "I always have a list of coaches ready. Look, when I go to the Senior Bowl every year, there are 500 coaches lined up who would like to coach this team." I would argue those two comments give you a pretty clear picture of the value assessment that Jerry Jones has of what a coach brings to the overall operation. I don't think that's just a number plucked out of thin air. He's used it too often. The fact he used it again after the regular season ended here, and really had to work to get it in there, right? But that number cropped up again. So I think that tells you a little something about the value that Jerry Jones attaches to that position. I think in his mind, now 500's hyperbole and an overstatement, and Jerry is prone to those. We know that. But if you get Jerry face to face, and it's hard to argue with this, can you find 500 other Micah Parsons? Can you find 500 other Dak Prescotts? 500 other CeeDee Lambs? Well, no, of course not. But you can come closer to finding 500 coaches than you can either one of those. So in Jerry's mind, again, it's hyperbole, but I think that's how he looks at it. These players are rare. I'm going to pay rare players. I'm not sure a rare coach would really, one, how many rare coaches are there? And two, what is their overall value to the organization when they don't get out on the field? So that's a long-winded way of saying I think he values the importance of coaching less than many owners in professional sports.
I don't think there's any question about that.
I just want to interject one thing on that, and it's one sentence. And I think what I'm finding, and I think this applies because Ray Davis is in his 80s as well. I think that as owners age and as we age, whether we're billionaires or not, everybody gets a little bit more protective of their capital. And that's the way it reads to me, is that Jerry, has he always been cheap as an owner? Do we think he's always been cheap as an owner? He has invested in players, and he has invested in people previously, right?
He hasn't invested in coaching staffs like other organizations. He has invested in players, in facility, in stadium, all of that. There's no question. But, even people with money draw the line on certain areas, right? They're willing to pay in one area, not another. And when it comes to coaching salaries, front office salaries, number of people in those positions, Jerry has always had a very demanding hand on okay, now we need to account for this. If we're going to pay for this, we need to account for it. So why do we need 3 people here instead of 1?
Which has led to inferior mental infrastructure there. Yes or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, look, all we have to do is go back and look at when players were going over Jerry's head, Deion Sanders included, and back in the day, we knew what he thought of coaches back then. I think it's also a reflection of the fact that the head coach is closer to being an administrator and being a guy closer to the GM, right? Jerry knows he can't play anymore, but he still thinks that he can run things. And so I think the whole conflict with Jimmy Johnson. I've always
squeezed on both sides, right? The coach is squeezed on both sides because Jerry's the ultimate decision maker and administrator, and the players who are the ones who are performing or not performing on the field. So a coach has a much smaller slice of the overall pie of importance, the way Jerry likes to talk about contracts. Let's talk about it with input,
Yeah, no question about that. And I think that I've always said, if Jimmy Johnson had just said, yeah, Jerry's a great owner and a GM, I couldn't have done this without him. If he had just said that, we wouldn't have had all these problems ever since. Jerry's just been trying to prove ever since that he could do this, and he was just as important to those, 3 Super Bowls as Jimmy was.
And the point that Evan made earlier, a slight variation of that, a branch of that is, do you know a lot of 82-year-old billionaires who get to this point in their career and go, I'm going to do things completely differently? Or you know what? I'm going to change now. This is a good time to embrace change. I think most of them, their career arc and experience just reinforces that I'm on the right track here. If anything, why do I need to listen to more people? I certainly know what I'm doing now. I have more wisdom through all of these years. This is my approach.
Yeah, David, I wish you would say that to all the people who write me constantly. Say, why don't you rip Jerry more? Why don't you do that? I said, well, first of all, he's been the punchline of about 75% of my columns, and it doesn't make any difference. We can all have fun with it, but it will not make an iota of difference,
one bit,
whatever we say.
All right, so let's move on to what people care about now, right? I mean, who's going to coach this team?
First of all, I just want to say this is what Evan always does. Evan likes to jump in and say, you guys are talking about stuff we don't even care about.
No.
Let me change the topic.
I think it's all
something that really matters.
I think it's all interesting. I think it's very interesting. But I think that, look, the general consensus now is, okay, Mike McCarthy's been discarded, and people are tired of all the Cowboy internal drama. And just like you said, Kevin, right? I mean, it's the same story year after year after year internally with the Cowboys. And all anybody cares about, I think, is, all right, so who's going to coach this team?
Well, what everybody always says is that who wants to coach this team? I've always said, and just like Jerry, not that 500, but I've always said, listen, coaches will line up for any job. People were lining up for the SMU job after they came off of the death penalty. I mean, the worst program in America, and people were lining up to get that job. I had coaches calling me and asking about it. So I think that you have to know that is going to happen. But I do think we might be approaching a little bit of a dynamic here in this situation where people are going to look at it like, man, the man is 82 years old. How close is he to senility, if not already? And he won't give up anything. And am I going to get myself in a mess here? Because, look, when the other guys have gotten fired, except with the exception of Jimmy Johnson, who took some time off before he got the Dolphins job, people weren't clamoring for him, right? And in this case, Mike McCarthy's already been asked to interview for the Chicago job. He supposedly maybe could be up for the Saints job. People think highly of Mike McCarthy. And I wonder at this point, before we get into who we think it's going to be, David, do you think that will have any impact on any of the real candidates, people that we would respect for the job?
Well, two things. One, I think McCarthy, after a 7-10 season, came out of this with more leverage than most coaches after a 7-10 season have, because I believe not only fans, but a lot of people around the league see this past season as a referendum on what Jerry and Steven didn't do as far as building a team and committing their resources, retaining valuable assets while still building towards something. I think it was more of a referendum on what they did and didn't do versus any failings of McCarthy and his staff. So I think you've already seen that with the request from Chicago and just the initial reaction. Two, if Jerry didn't know that, and I think he did, he certainly got a reminder of it when he was flashed up on the big screen at AT&T Stadium before the UT Ohio State game and was booed comically loudly. As far. Three, I thought, Troy Aikman, before he did the game last night, was on talking with the crew at ESPN about the job, and I thought he distilled it pretty well. It's a high-profile job, but that doesn't mean it's a coveted job, and I think there's a distinction.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
now, all that being said, you're still going to have qualified candidates because coaches have egos. They're going to say, well, look, the talent there is better than any of these other openings. I can go there. All I have to do is win 2 playoff games. No one has won 2 playoff games there in 29 years. I can do that. We're talking 8 days. I get them to the playoffs. We're going to win a couple of games. We're going to stumble into it. Then how have I set myself up? So you're going to have qualified people do it, but that's a difference than being a truly coveted job because people who come into this job know it's different. Every head coaching job on every pro team is a little bit different than the other. There are different irritants you have to deal with in all of those jobs and different perks. But you can argue things are done a little bit differently here than they are anywhere else, and there's more to adjust to.
I'll say that. All right, let's move on to Evan. What Evan wants to talk about. Who are our candidates for the job? First of all, let's talk about what we know. Already, Deion Sanders has confirmed that he talked to Jerry Jones and that they had a nice conversation. And considering that in one sense, it does make perfect sense that he might be interested in Deion Sanders. He's done a great job at Colorado in resurrecting that program in a short amount of time. And also, obviously, he played for Jerry Jones. Jerry knows him very well. Michael Irvin's been campaigning for him nonstop. We've heard lots of things that would make that a logical explanation or a logical choice, starting with the fact that if you waited too long to move on and you can't talk to anybody who's still playing in the playoffs right now, well, if he was going to hire Deion Sanders all along, then what did Jerry care? I could just go ahead and get Deion if I want him. So, David, let me ask you this. Do you think that Deion Sanders is a serious candidate for this job?
Well, and to me, the only revelation about the fact that Jerry and Deion spoke is that Jerry was actually able to make the call before Deion could get on his cell to initiate it. These are birds of a marketing and self-promoting feather. They're loving the attention. I do not believe that Deion Sanders will be the next head coach based on what he has said before this, and also based on Jerry's approach. We're talking about Deion Sanders. I'm assuming we'll talk about some other college coaches here maybe in a bit. They all have buyouts. What did we just talk about Jerry and devoting money? He's going to pay someone anywhere. In Deion's case, it'll be $8 million just to talk to him, to pay him more money on top of that. That doesn't fit the way he's really approached this job in the past.
No, it doesn't. And it does feel like a smokescreen to me. I think that this is just, as you said, a self-serving thing. And we know that Jerry likes to do that kind of thing. There's been a lot of talk that
Deion does too. Jerry's
absolutely
not alone on this one.
Who is a bigger promoter than Deion Sanders?
And Deion is in the process of talking about an extension in Colorado. So what does this do? This helps him and his, oh, by the way, look, you may want to go ahead and sign me to an extension. The Cowboys have expressed an interest. And what does it do for Jerry and the Cowboys? Oh, for all of you people out there saying this isn't a job people want anymore, well, look, this is a pretty high-profile name. He wants it.
I'm not so sure. I know that he is probably the biggest a person who causes more consternation or more celebration than Deion Sanders among this fan base and then people in Texas in general. I did see that I was sent something this morning about a group that analyzed social media, and according to them, Deion Sanders is their number one choice on social media to coach the Cowboys. So I think that there is certainly a market for it out there, but I'm like you. I don't think that's actually going to happen either. So we're going to go around the board here. We're going to list the guys that we think is going to have a shot at this job. I want to say before we get into it, we have no clue because we're not even sure Jerry has a clue yet. These are just our guesses. And so, Dave, we're going to let you go last since you're the expert. So we're going to start with Evan. Evan, who do you got for the Cowboys job?
Well, I'll just cut to the chase here. I think Jerry's going to hire somebody he knows. I think I do agree with Troy Aikman. I don't know that this is a coveted job right now. And all of that leads me to Kellen Moore, somebody Jerry's familiar with. He's gone off and been part of the Eagles staff for a couple of years. And I think at the end of the day, experienced coaches are either going to be guys who are kind of, for lack of a better term, over the hill. Or I think there's going to be, or the reckoning is going to be, you're going to have to take somebody who's young and unproven and also cheap. And I think that comes back to, I think, Kellen. And he's an offensive mind, right? And he's worked with Dak. And I think, David, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've got a good working relationship. I think they've got a very good working relationship.
Oh, Dak lobbied for him to be jumped from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that was his guy. I want to, before I reveal my pick, I'm going to shoot down Tim Kalashaw's. Tim campaigned for Cliff Kingsbury. It's his number one choice because of what he did.
He's shameless in it too.
Jane Daniels this year in Washington. Also, what he did making Kyler Murray at 5'9" a legitimate NFL quarterback, and of course he didn't give him too much credit for Patrick Mahomes. Let me say this about that: there is no better quarterback coach in the world than Cliff Kingsbury. When he was at Texas Tech, not only did he have Patrick Mahomes, he had Baker Mayfield. He had I can't remember the kid's name that went to the Giants and played. He had 3 quarterbacks who played pro football besides Patrick Mahomes, and he had them all at the same time. And with all those guys, he picked out the right guy. And at that time, it wasn't a given that Patrick Mahomes was going to be this all-world quarterback. He was only a 3-star coming out of high school. He wasn't getting a lot of scholarship offers. So he is tremendous at that. He is also maybe the worst head coach that I have seen in the last 20 years. I mean, we can talk about at Texas Tech what happened. This is a man who has no desire whatsoever to be a head coach or to be in charge of anything. What he wants to do is sit in a room and watch film all day. That's what he wants to do. He's really good at it. And he's really good at coaching up these guys. He knew that Johnny Manziel was a star before anybody did. He really gets that part of it, but he hates being a head coach. He would duck out of restaurants to avoid people, to avoid attention. I've interviewed him in press conferences, and it was painful for him to give answers at these press conferences. I've just never seen anybody less inclined to be a head coach. Now, maybe he wants to do it again. I don't know why he would. I mean, he's made himself a great reputation now as an offensive coordinator and really took off this year with Washington. I will say this, Jane Daniels is pretty good. It's easy to make good quarterbacks look better. Can you make a bad or average quarterback good? That's harder to do. So anyway, that's my shoot down of that. I'm going to go with Ben Johnson. I don't know that Ben Johnson would want this job, but certainly you can't deny what he did with Jared Goff in Detroit. Now, he's got a lot of talent in that offense. It's a lot better offense than what the Cowboys have. The personnel is a lot better. The Lions are bearing the fruit of all those years they were terrible. And all those first-round picks that they had that were very high picks, well, now those guys are just throughout that lineup, right? It's just got, one star player after another. So, yeah, it's a lot better offense there to stay there if he wants to and wait for a better job to come open. And maybe that does happen next year or the year after. And maybe he just has fun with this and sees how long that it lasts. I have no idea what his ambitions are. I think that Jerry would be intrigued by all of that, though. And I agree with Evan. I think he will hire an offensive coach. Jerry's always been an offensive-minded guy. He thinks that's where the star power is, even though he probably has more talent on the defensive side of his team, which is kind of rare, and how that has happened and how that it has evolved over time. But I'm going to say Ben Johnson.
I will certainly. I can see Jerry as he works his way through the process, getting to, both candidates you mentioned, neither one has been a head coach at any level. I can see Jerry potentially working his way to that point. But I think he would have to work to get there, because I think he's always been of the belief that, a first-time head coach or if I install someone with very little head coaching experience, there's a learning curve, and it's going to take a year or two before you reap the benefits of that. You heard him say that constantly about Jason Garrett. And year 3 and 4 is going, well, now we're seeing the benefits of just plugging him in on the job and going. So I don't think that Jerry is prone to do that. I think he's more likely to go with a veteran coach and plug in. So because of that, I'm going to say Pete Carroll. It's a guy with a Super Bowl title, much like Mike McCarthy. He is 73 years old, although you could never tell it when you look at him or in a room with him. The guy's energy level and exuberance is off the charts. He's a good defensive guy. The key on someone like Pete Carroll would be, okay, you don't have a great offensive mind as head coach. Well, you get that next great young offensive coordinator in here. Look, Dan Campbell did it with Ben Johnson. Pete Carroll, you do it here. That's what we want. So I think that is, I would think that Jerry Jones's strong inclination going into this process is to go with a veteran coach.
Do we have any idea about Pete Carroll and his interest? I mean, I know that he was supposedly interested in the Bears job.
Bears, I believe the Raiders have also talked to him. I had heard he's committed to getting back into the league this year after much like Mike McCarthy, a veteran coach, 1 year off, and then is ready to hit the ground running again. He falls in that same pattern. Sean Payton was in that same, kind of for different reasons, was in that same pattern as well.
Sure. I have to say, David, I like your choice. I do think that Pete Carroll is the kind of guy that should appeal to Jerry. I think he would appeal to these players. He's always been a player's coach. Yep. And you're right. He does have a lot of energy. I've always been, that's the one time the lovely wife has ever been interested in watching football is when the Seahawks were playing. And I think she was paying more attention to the head coach.
There?
Yeah, that maybe the players, she had a little crush on Pete Carroll. He's a dynamic personality. There's no question about that, which he's come a long way in his career. I can remember a time when it wasn't so good for him. Well, we can say the same thing about Bill Belichick, right?
A dynamic personality, but not a domineering personality. So that's not going to step on Jerry Jones's toes.
No, it's not like Rex Ryan, right? Getting him the job. Yeah. I'm still waiting to see if Rex is going to get that Jets job.
I'd have zero issue with Pete Carroll. I mean, it would be good to see somebody with positive energy on the sidelines. I really like the way I like his demeanor in games. I don't know how he is as a prep coach or anything like that, but obviously he's had results and he's had experience. My question still on the veteran coaching thing is, if there was any possibility that Jerry was going to walk away from McCarthy, why would he have not, through back channels, reached out to Belichick and said that he wanted a guy with Bill Belichick's pedigree here, hold out for me until the end of this season?
Well, I believe all that happened. I mean, I can't envision a scenario where there weren't back channel discussions between the Jones family and Bill Belichick's representation. Or
do you think Belichick was not interested in this?
I think I would be shocked if the two sides didn't talk, and whether it was mutual or one side saying, I don't think this is going to work. And it wasn't, and I'm a firm believer in this. And has there ever been a head coach that does more due diligence than Bill Belichick that we're aware of? He knew what jobs were going to come open. He knew what jobs there was a good chance were going to come open. And he got a feel that I'm going to be left out in the cold again. I'm not going to subject myself to this. I'm going to college.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I think we should lay odds whether Bill Belichick is still the coach of the Tar Heels for their opener.
Well, that's a good one because his buyout goes down from $10 million to $1 million, I think, June 1st.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those deals. Like I remember one time I was talking to Ronnie Arrow, who'd been a coach of South Alabama. I know Ronnie from his days at San Jack, and I was talking to him in the coaching lobby at the Final Four, and that's where always coaches are gathering, trying to find jobs. And he was working outside of coaching, and he was telling me how much he liked this new job. It was all great. And every time somebody walked past me, he'd say, "Have you heard anything?" I wanted to say, "Ronnie, I'm hearing all this while you're saying it." So that's the way coaches are. They're always looking for something, and I think that if Tom Brady were to twist his arm, Tom being a minority owner of the Raiders, I think he would gladly take that job. All right.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
We're going to back out of this now since we were talking about coaches that had buyouts and might have some interest, or the NFL team should be interested in them. Certainly, Steve Sarkisian is a guy at Texas who is drawing some NFL interest. There's been a lot of speculation that he would love to go back to the NFL. And I think it's kind of hard for me to see that at the moment. He seems to be such a good fit for Texas. It's all gone so well for him there. I don't know why he would want to give that up unless he just doesn't want to put up with all the stuff you have to do in college football now. But you can make almost as much money in college football now, and I think they're probably not quite as trigger happy as they are, as Jared Mayo found out, in New England after 1 year. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that he's a guy that Jerry might talk to, especially because of his offensive reputation. He did a great job with Texas, especially the last 2 years, getting them to the semifinals twice. A lot of consternation at the end of that game, a very wild finish. Of course, it's on deadline, and I'm trying to figure out, I had two leads ready to go here, in whether the Texas won or lost. And then with the strip play and fumble return by Jack Sawyer, who had been, Quinn Ewers' roommate when he was in the short time he was at Ohio State, and they were still good friends. For that to happen like that, it's just an unbelievable finish for Texas in that game. And it kind of just sewed up Quinn's career at Texas, a little star-crossed. But before that happened, 2 plays before that, there was a very controversial call down at the goal line where Sark said that he saw them in a big package, and he was trying to get to the corner with those big people and figured that he could do that, when in fact, if you look at the numbers and how it lined up, there were 5 Buckeyes on that side of the field to only 4 Longhorns, which is a little bit of a mismatch, and that's what you saw. As soon as the play happened, as soon as on the toss pitch, the toss sweep, it was blown up before it ever started, and lost 7 yards, and ultimately forced Quinn into that 4th and 8. So when you boys saw that call, what did you think?
Listen, I'm watching it on an airplane on the way back, and on very tiny screen. And my thought at that point in time was, it didn't make a ton of sense. I just felt like Texas had actually worn Ohio State down in the middle a little bit, and had started to have a little bit of success running the ball straight forward. And I just don't know. I don't know why you start a play from the 1 yard line where now you're going to make your guy gain 8 yards. That was my biggest issue there. Move the ball straight forward. You've got 1 yard to go. You've got a big offensive line. It's an experienced offensive line. Go try and push forward for a yard.
David?
That call's never made sense to me in that situation. It doesn't make sense from the angles. It doesn't make – look, if you feel you're being overpowered in the front, but 1, that wasn't the case. 2, you can get movement and then still attack north-south. You can move the pocket. You can do a shorter, toss pitch that then go straight ahead. But just stringing it along, like Evan said, to run 8 yards to get one, you're just inviting more chances for it to go wrong than for it to succeed, in my mind.
Yeah, I never like running sideways at the goal line. It's never a good idea to me. My favorite play at the goal line, you got to have the kind of quarterback, though, is just the bootleg. I just love a bootleg where you mirror the quarterback, where he's running, and then you got a receiver running with him in the end zone. He's got the option then either to toss to the guy or run. Essentially, that's what Vince Young did at the Rose Bowl when they won the championship. It was going to be, USC had to decide whether are we going to make Vince pass or are we going to make him run. They made him run, which was the opposite of what they should have done. They should have forced him to pass. Vince was too good a runner, and he didn't have to do anything but just stroll.
Here's the other thing for me that didn't make sense is, right, every time Texas needed a run in a very short yard package, in a critical situation, those were the downs that Arch Manning got, right? And so here's a situation.
There was some speculation. I know what you're going to say. There's some speculation that he might have suffered a concussion on the carry earlier in the game.
Okay.
I did not write that because I don't know that that's true. He took a real shot.
Okay.
And he looked like he might have been a little woozy. You're right. That is certainly the possibility in that situation. And certainly he's the kind of guy who could run that. And that's what makes, for me, Texas, already the odds are up for next year's championship. And Texas is the favorite to win it all next year. They are the favorite because they have a terrific quarterback prospect ready to go, because they had the number one recruiting class in the nation, because they have a lot of good players this year. And they will get some players back. They'll get C.J. Baxter back, who was going to be their lead running back before he got hurt and missed the entire season. I do think that Texas is a legitimate candidate to win a national championship next year. I don't buy the fact that Sark's call cost them the title. I don't know that they would have scored. I mean, the play before the toss sweep, they ran into the line and just got stuffed. Ohio State has the best defensive line in the country. They're really good. I don't know that they would have scored a touchdown there no matter what, but he certainly didn't put them in a good position to do that. And I do think also the onus was a little bit on Quinn. I don't like to put too much on these kids in college football, but you got to get rid of the ball. And he did not get rid of the ball. You just simply cannot take a sack in that kind of situation. You got to get rid of the ball. He said he thought he was going to get it away before Sawyer got there. He didn't, and they paid the price for that. That's a tough way to lose. I do think that Ohio State's a better team than Texas, just better overall. But I thought Texas did a great job in that game of defending Ohio State and taking Jeremiah Smith out of the game. He had one catch for 3 yards. He caught 187 yards worth of passes against Oregon, 3 yards against Texas. So they did some great things. The one bad thing they did on defense was at the end of the first half, they gave up the 75-yard touchdown on a screen pass. My gosh, how does that even happen? And the crazy explanation from Ryan Day afterwards was that, we never run the screen. We just never run it. And they said, the coaches were asking me, what do you want to do? Do you want to just take a knee? What do you want to do here? And he goes, let's just run the screen. He goes, they said, are you sure? I mean, that's for everybody out there who said it was obvious they were going to do that. They weren't even sure that they were going to do it. Just like, okay, sure, let's run it. And then guy goes 75 yards for a touchdown. So
yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. I don't know that you can say Sark's play calling cost Texas a game, and I'm not going to blame any of Texas's players individually. I will say this: I do think I don't think there has been a quarterback in the country who's had to live under the shadow of his backup to the extent that Quinn Ewers did the last 2 years, and that's a hard burden to carry around. I just, as I said to my daughter when Natalie was all brokenhearted about this game, Ohio State made the stop when they had to. Texas had the ball first and goal at the 1 yard line, and Ohio State made stops. That's all you can ask for is the opportunity, and sometimes the other team is just better. And I thought Ohio State did a great job there. And I think you will both know that there's nothing I hate more than giving Ohio State credit for anything. But yeah, they did a great job there.
Well, Ohio State was favored, and I believe everybody at the Dallas Morning News picked Ohio State to win the game.
Like that means anything.
We've seen that. Certainly with the Cowboys, it does not. I am well aware of that. Right.
Oh no, they were. I picked them to lose by 11. I think. That's a great Ohio State team. I think in some ways I feel sorry for Notre Dame. They're going to make me eat my words, but I feel sorry for them that they're going to have to run into that because This was the national championship game on Friday at the Cotton Bowl. The Notre Dame, is not going to have, and I don't think Penn State was either going to have enough firepower to beat Ohio State. That was the thing about that. We can complain about Sark's play calling, but he dialed up some plays that sprung guys for some big gains in that game without a running game. And to be able to do that and his ability to get people open and to do those kind of things, he's very well respected in the coaching community for that. There are people out there who will tell you he's the best play caller in college football. So doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes and didn't make a mistake on Friday, but they may not have been in that position without his play calling. So, all right.
Kevin, one last takeaway on the playoff before we get done with the playoff. My playoff take is, look, you've got two teams that probably aren't in the field if we're still a 4-team field, right?
Right.
Playing for the national championship. And I also think what we saw is that probably 12 teams is a couple teams too many. It was really hard to get 11 and 12 to be considered really good seeds. I still think that my feeling would have been that a 6 or 8 team playoff is probably what would have been the best solution, and I still kind of maintain that. But it also makes me kind of come to your side of the thought process here is there's no reward for playing in your conference championship game now. There is none.
No. And look, everybody thinks now because, we've had 12, so it'll naturally go to 16, and I don't think that's so natural to think that. I don't think there's any great desire to do it. I thought it was interesting this year in these playoffs, and we didn't even know this. We were constantly asking, all right, so, in the next round, when should we, as media, be showing up for these places? And as it turned out, even for the national championship game, they're only making these kids available 2 days before the game. So it used to be, for our listeners' edification, used to be you would go in a whole week ahead of time. I remember when Texas played in the Rose Bowl against USC, I got there 8 days before the game, and the players were out there that entire time. So they're trying to.
Why did you only write once before the game?
Yeah, well, that's right. There might have been something about that. I don't know. Might have been a boondoggle. They're trying to make this as unobtrusive for these players as possible, as much as you can make it that way. Although I always say everyone's so concerned about how much time football players are missing. They don't miss any time. No one cares about swimmers or volleyball players or baseball players or basketball players. They're missing class left and right. And no one cares about any of that. They only talk about football players. And obviously the toll they take in football is much greater. And I will certainly concede that. But I think the only way you could go to 16 is if you eliminated the conference championship games. And then you could play that first round right after that, and maybe even one more round, and then you take the break for the holidays, and then you could come back and play after that. But I thought that's
I think the advantage on that, Kevin, would be you don't take that rust element into account, right? So teams aren't off for 2 weeks before they play a game, and then your 1 seed is playing is playing the 16. So there's a more significant chance that your 1, 2, 3, and 4s are going to advance in this tournament.
Well, what I think will happen, the change we will see is that the conference champions will not get buys, and I think that is the way to go. I think that was silly to say that these schools deserve this, and then they all got wiped out in the playoffs. And I don't have a problem with that. Look, we see the playoffs in any level, in any sport, there's never any guarantee they're going to be good games. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It doesn't mean that the process is wrong. It's just how the game's played out. I don't have a big problem with that. But I do have a problem with the fact that those teams should not have been getting buys. It led to some teams getting an easier path to the playoffs. Certainly Penn State had the easiest path to the playoffs until they lost. Texas was the second easiest until they ran into Ohio State. So I think that if you make that little tweak to it, I think it was good having the games on campus, and so I think that it'll be fine going forward. And I got to tell you, as I said before, I thought the season itself was the most fun it's ever been that I can recall in college football. And I thought the playoffs have been fine. There have been a couple of really good games. There were both the semifinal games were terrific. Went right down to the wire, and Texas played in a real barn burner against Arizona State in the quarterfinals. So that's 3 games right there that were really good. And so if we get another one, on the 20th, that'd be great. I'm not expecting it though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing that I would say about all that before we get out of here is that the season was great. I had more fun watching the season than I've had in a long, long time as a college football fan. But and part of this, I guess, is geographic bias. But I'm just not that invested in Ohio State, Notre Dame. It just doesn't excite me the way previous national championship games are, and it's just because I'm not a big fan of Big Ten football or that whole kind of Midwest look. I don't know any other way to say it.
Well, Notre Dame style, they're not exactly a high-powered offense, so that probably goes into the equation.
And Ryan Day colors his beard. Let's just say that right now, okay?
He's got a lot of hair too. He's coloring all of it. It is jet black. I feel like that before the game, he's got some shoe polish and he's just running that through his hair. I expect that if he gets really hot, he's going to do that Rudy Giuliani thing where it's going to start dribbling down.
Starts melting down the side.
Yeah. I will say this will be I think this will be the most watched game ever, simply because you're going to have all those Notre Dame fans and all the Catholics, and you're going to have I think Ohio State has the biggest alumni base of any college in America. So there's going to be a lot of people watching that game on the 20th. All right, we need to get out of here real quick. Before we get out, though, we want to talk about the Rangers and the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes officially start on Wednesday. We're taping this on Tuesday. He's got until the 23rd to decide, Evan? Yeah. Okay. And the news for Rangers fans is that they are out.
As far as the Rangers are concerned, he has decided already.
Yes, that's right.
He has informed the club that he will not be coming to Texas, and the finalists appear, based on various reports, appear to be the Dodgers, which I think were far and away the betting chalk going into this whole offseason, partially very strongly because of the World Series, the near dynasty, and the fact that Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto are there. I think that San Diego and Toronto are the other 2 teams that still appear to be in it. And I thought from the moment Joel Wolf mentioned the possibility of a small market as a fit for Sasaki, I thought that San Diego appeared to be at least a co-favorite in this. Then you factor in that Yu Darvish is something of a hero to Sasaki and something of a mentor. And I think there were a lot of Ranger fans who were saying, well, Darvish came to Texas and he had a good experience here and it propelled him. That's fine. But that's a memory. Yu Darvish is currently in San Diego. Why would you go somewhere where a guy once pitched when you can go where a guy is pitching? And so I do think the one thing that I do think on all of this is, and I'm sure this comes across as somewhat biased, but I do think that if you're taking all of this meticulously and in detail, I think the Rangers, who have the second shiniest World Series trophy in the books, who have a pitcher who was a GM, who has a GM who was a pitcher, who have a World Series 4-time winning manager, who have the newest ballpark in baseball in terms of infrastructure and technology and all of that, and have invested significantly in young pitching, I think that they probably deserved a home visit here, right? And I don't know that would be consolation for anything, but I do think that the Rangers probably deserved a visit. They've been aggressive this offseason. They've they've done all the steps necessary to say we are serious about contending, and I think they've got all the pieces in place to have a long-term window of contention.
How did the Toronto Blue Jays get into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't really. I think how to say this. This is my supposition and nothing more. But for a month, basically since this whole 45-day period started, the supposition was he's going to the Dodgers or he's going to San Diego. And I think that maybe to let people know, hey, there's some chance that this was not all predetermined. Let's pick another city and make a trip there. And so there's Toronto. And of course, there was the whole Shohei Ohtani supposed flight to Toronto last year when he was going to sign in free agency, which turned out to be not even Shohei Ohtani. And another great example of modern day journalism at its best. I think it's more smokescreen than anything else. I will be flabbergasted if he ends up in Toronto, a team that's in the AL East that struggled. The GM situation there may not be very stable. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. If he goes to San Diego or Los Angeles, both of those situations to me make a lot of sense. And I've got no issue. And I don't think that there's any, I don't think you could fault him for going to either one of those places. I just think that the Rangers probably deserved a at-home look to say, okay, we just want to make sure that we're not overlooking something here.
Yeah. No, they've done a good job. Chris Young has done a great job of adding to this roster, and we've talked about that this winter. I think he's, the thing about Chris is that he's very aggressive, and he's very impatient, and I think that describes most the desires of most fans is that they want a GM who is like that. They would rather have a Dave Dombrowski than to have somebody just sitting on their thumbs and just waiting for something to happen.
CY is very decisive. I wouldn't say he's impulsive, but he is aggressive and he is decisive. And when he makes up his mind, he can go in that direction. But that doesn't mean that all the inner workings and all the internal due diligence isn't being done. I think that this offseason has been a great exercise in seeing just how determined and purposeful he can be in putting together a roster. Now, with that said, I will say this because we haven't talked since they signed Chris Martin. Again, another addition to the bullpen, which I thought was really significant, and they've done a ton of heavy lifting in that bullpen. But with all that said, and the Rangers having said that they probably are going to camp kind of with the bullpen that they've got, or they'll be content going to camp with the bullpen that they've got, I don't believe that for a minute. I still think that before it's all said and done, they're going to add a closer or a pitcher with some closing experience. And my reasoning for this is you've done a ton of work here. You've done a ton of heavy lifting. You don't want to go through 2023 again where you had a bullpen that you had to address in midseason and it ended up costing you Cole Reagans in the process. I think that they may have to move a little bit of money, maybe move John Gray's contract or something like that to create more room to add another guy. But I do think that when this is all said and done, you're going to see a veteran with some closing experience. It may not necessarily be a guy who was a closer last year, but a veteran with some closing experience at the back end of the Rangers bullpen.
Yeah, I believe that. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast. We thank you for jumping on with us. We hope you'll come back next week, and maybe by then we'll have a new coach for the Cowboys, and we can talk about that. David's laughing.
Sorry.
So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.